Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, on today's podcast, we are going to be talking all about our recent boot camp.
But before we do that, we want to remind you to hit that like button, and we're almost to 2,000 subscribers. So if you really want to see me smile ear to ear, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can help us hit 2,000 subscribers.
And if you want to delve deeper into the topic of domestic discipline, want to get bonus resources and support the channel, a link to our Patreon is down below.
So boot camp, I don't know about you, but I think that this was probably one of, we've only done 3, but one of our most successful boot camps. If I had to rank the boot camps, I would put this kind of at number 1. I
agree. Like you just mentioned, we've done 3 boot camps now. Our very first boot camp was about a year ago.
About a year ago.
We've done a boot camp about every 6 months. I think that'll continue to be the trend for us. We kind of like that schedule. It gives us the opportunity to kind of just be more intentional in evaluating our relationship, evaluating our systems, and being able to just reconnect. Yeah. And so that has been helpful to do that about every 6 months.
You always got to take a time, periodically during the year and say, is what I'm doing really working for me, helping me reach my goal, or even if it is to help you refocus. And I feel like that's what these boot camps help us do, is just to refocus and find out what's working, what's not working. And so it's really, really helpful in that way.
I completely agree. And while that very first boot camp is always going to be a little sentimental to me because, it was the first time that we really took a concentrated time to really focus in on our relationship and make some major changes. And that, I feel like that was kind of the first step to get to where we are now. And the past year has just really, it's been such a steady growth over the last year. And I feel like we're kind of, not that we're nearing the finish line, because there is no finish line. You always work on your relationship.
Always working.
But I feel like we've been making a little bit of a sprint to our goals right now. And so that's been super exciting. And this boot camp was just kind of part of that process, part of that sprint towards where we want to be.
I'm glad that you kind of mentioned, our first boot camp. It is special from the standpoint that I feel like that was laying the foundation. And now we're starting to really see this is what it's going to be. But you're right. If it wasn't for that first boot camp, I don't know if this one would have been successful.
So I came to you with the idea of doing a boot camp. It was probably October, I think.
Yeah.
And you weren't sure if you wanted to at first.
But ultimately, what convinced me was, no, it will be good for us because we need to continue the momentum that we've already started.
I am so glad we decided to do it because as we got closer, especially even this last week, it became really, really obvious that there were some things that we needed to talk through. And the boot camp really gave us that time to be able to make those changes, talk through all of those things. I didn't think when we first started, I was like, oh, we're in such a good place. I don't know what we're really going to focus the boot camp on.
So you thought that too?
I did.
Yeah.
But then as we got closer, I was like, oh, we have some things that we need to overhaul here.
That was the same thing that happened with me, which is why I'm just smiling, because I didn't realize that you were kind of in the same place I was. But then as it approached, it was like, oh no, I'm really glad we're doing this because we need the overhaul.
When we do our boot camps, we structure it for 3 days. That's kind of the magic number that we have found for us.
It worked well.
It really did. And really what boot camp does for us is it gives us the time to have intentional conversations. That is the most important part of boot camp. I think that when people think of domestic discipline boot camp, they get so caught up in the planned punishments and the spanking and the discipline side of what a boot camp is. And yes, that is part of it, but that is not the main part. Especially for us, because we've been at this for a while, we did not need to, at this point, we wanted to solidify our discipline system. but we did not need to completely overhaul our discipline system. And we didn't need to, I didn't need to practice submitting to discipline.
Right.
That's already very ingrained into our relationship. And so we kind of take the focus off of that for our boot camps, because that's not something that we need to focus on. For us, it's more of the relationship building aspects of boot camp that we put more focus into.
And I think that for me was the key in this boot camp, because not that the other ones that I didn't feel that we were getting closer. I did, but this one, for some reason, I don't know, I just felt like we moved closer into our relationship, the oneness, if you will, more than the other boot camps.
And I think that's because we have a better sense of our roles. Like, we both have developed into our roles a little bit better.
Yes.
To where we weren't, like that first boot camp, we were really trying to define what did our roles look like.
Yes.
And so it was just a different experience, because you were really trying to figure out, what does leadership look like to you? Well, you already have a sense of what leadership looks like and how you want to lead.
And what's worked and what hasn't.
And so we were starting from almost like a middle starting point. We weren't starting from ground zero.
That's true.
This was really a building on to, not starting from scratch. And so because we had all that, because we were able to kind of take where we are and just continue to talk through things and continue to grow where we wanted to be, that was really beneficial in this boot camp.
I feel like there was this nice perfection of the schedule in the third one from the other two.
So the first one, because we were kind of defining our roles, we did have a very regimented structure to it.
Right.
You know, we had very strict protocols. Every minute of every day was very structured, very intentional. You know, there was a high level of expectation for submission and obedience. There was a high expectation that Coda would practice leading very meticulously. And we do those things now as part of our daily lives. Not necessarily to that extent, but, just as a taken in hand, there is a high expectation that I submit and obey.
Yep.
And you have gotten very comfortable leading in a very tangible way.
Yep.
That didn't need to be such a focus.
Right.
And so we were able to maybe be a little bit more relaxed in the schedule without it feeling like we weren't paying attention.
Yes. And so I just felt like that structure was really, really good.
And so this time we went in with a unified expectation. We talked a lot about what we needed from the schedule, what we needed from the goals, all of those things.
And I feel like the word you used just a minute ago was absolutely right. We felt more unified going into this one than I think the past ones, because again, the first one, it wasn't bad, but we were just trying to figure out, okay, how do you structure boot camp? How does it all work? This one, it was great, the conversation that we had back and forth, putting it together. And so going in, it was even not knowing how the final piece was going to look, there still was this idea of we know exactly what to expect. We're on the same page. We're going to execute that. I think that was one of the most encouraging parts about it.
I definitely agree. And I think that part of preparing for boot camp is having all these conversations, setting your goals. What do you actually need from boot camp? Because it's not always going to be the same, and no couple is going to have the same goals. So you need to decide, okay, what are we actually going to be focusing on? What is our goal here? We like to set 3 goals because we like to have each goal to be focused on for one day of our boot camp. You can have one overarching goal that you focus on all 3 days on the same goal. We just like to structure it where it's okay, day 1, we want to focus all on this goal. Day 2, we're going to focus all on this. And so we had 3 goals going in.
And I feel like that helped a lot.
It did. It helps organize how you are going to approach the activities, how you are going to approach the conversations that you have. And also, if you include punishments, planned punishments, which we do, it helps you kind of focus on why are you going to do that punishment?
Right. Yeah.
Because I am a big believer that if you go into a boot camp, you need to have a purpose behind why you are going through that punishment. Because if you don't, it's so difficult to actually administer and accept.
Yes.
And even if the purpose behind the punishment is just to practice that system, that's okay. It's okay if that's your purpose.
That's the goal. That's still a goal that you have in mind. Absolutely.
We tend to like to use the planned punishments in boot camp to kind of clear the slate of either some bad habits or bad behaviors that have been allowed to develop that have maybe been ignored or unaddressed. And so we really do try to look through, okay, the last 6 months since our last boot camp, how have things been going? What have we done? What have we changed? And are there any habits that have crept in or habits that have been allowed to develop or have gone unaddressed that we want to address now so that we can create a new expectation moving forward? And that's how we approach those planned punishments. And so you want to talk about all that. You want to know what are our goals? What are the focuses of the punishments? How is that going to focus our relationship building activities, our conversations? And another thing that I do that is maybe not talked about as much is I do a lot of preparation in our home to prepare for boot camp, because one of the main purposes of boot camp is to spend time together. So you want to lessen your workload. Obviously, Coda takes off of his office job that he goes to every day. He takes off of work so that he can be physically present in the home. But one thing that I do is I make sure that all of our laundry is caught up. I make sure that all of the major cleaning in our home is done so that the day-to-day home tasks are not taking a lot of time.
Yes.
It's more of just maintaining a clean space, but I make sure that everything is really fresh, freshly cleaned, ready to go, going into boot camp. I also do a lot of meal prep so that I'm not having to spend a lot of time preparing, planning meals.
Or you're not tempted to eat out too, because one of the things that you want to try to take away from in boot camp is to try to leave. Because one of the things that I think that we learned from, because we kind of did this a little bit more in the second boot camp.
We did.
That we learned from the first one, and of course the second one too, is that during this time you want to be as focused as you can on the tasks at hand. So you don't really want to go anywhere.
You want to try to prepare so that you limit those distractions as much as possible. So one of the things that we did is that we built in time where we could have some individual downtime. This was key for us.
Really key.
To be able to sustain the schedule. Because Coda and I are both fairly introverted. And the idea of having an expectation of having conversation and having to just kind of be physically together, side by side, in the mindset of I have to give direction, I have to receive direction, that feels very overwhelming to both of us. And so we took that experience from the first one. The second one, things kind of fell apart because there was not enough structure, because Coda definitely was I can't handle that level of being quote unquote on all the time.
Right.
And so there wasn't enough balance in the second one. So we really tried to create that balance here. And I think that we struck a really good balance in how we approach the schedule. So
absolutely.
In the morning, we had a morning check-in, and in the past, we've done maintenance the past 2 boot camps, we've done maintenance every morning. We decided to forego that because we are in a really good place in our relationship. Coda knows that I'm receptive to being given direction and being given kind of that, like, here's the expectations kind of pep talk without having to have maintenance to reinforce that. That's just where we are in our relationship. And so it worked well.
And I think that set us up for success, especially for you when we did do the punishments on 2 of those days. But again, I think we got there because that first one does take a lot of your time and focus and effort, but it's important so that you can get to this. So yeah, because we had that experience and had built those, we felt like, well, no, I don't think we need to worry about a morning maintenance. And I think that was okay for this boot camp.
It was
sure.
Like that first boot camp, you're really laying the foundation of expectations, and you're really laying the foundation of what you are, like, what you're going through, right? And so, I mean, because we had that foundation, we knew what the expectations were. We knew kind of what we were going through in this boot camp. We didn't need the maintenance, but we still had a check-in.
Yep.
It was important for Coda to communicate expectations. It was important for him to, tell me the schedule, tell me what we were doing that day. And so that was really helpful. And I really did enjoy that we started our day with a very intentional conversation where you took a lot of just very intentional leadership.
Yes. Yeah. And part of that was because we had discussed from the time we had said, hey, do we want to do a boot camp? And we had put things together. We had talked about what the focus was going to be individually as well as a couple. And so I had already decided, like, the focus for me individually for the boot camp was to focus on more of being an intentional leader and being intentional with all the decisions that I made and how I went about instructing Aria on what she was going to do.
And my focus was more about accepting your leadership without having to have explanation, without having to have, because it's not that I didn't accept your leadership before, but it was always like, hey, I'll accept your leadership once you explain to me why you're doing everything you're doing. And that was the habit that I was trying to break out of and say, I'm just going to work on accepting and receiving without question, basically.
And to be fair, that's the habit that I was trying to break, is making a decision and then giving an explanation, right? And we both had come to the conclusion that, look, I don't need to do that. I can tell you what needs to be done, and you just need to do that. And so that was really helpful because it was the same goal, but also different at the same time based on our roles. And so I think that's also why it worked so well.
And so the big part with our boot camps is the relationship building activities. And what they are is basically like a question where it's an overarching question based on the goal that we have. And then it's like several questions that kind of like answer that question.
Right.
If that makes any sense at all.
Kind of like main question, and then you've got these like little questions that give to the overall answer.
And I actually typed them out this time. We printed them off as kind of in a workbook format.
I liked that much better this time, by the way. Usually we're just writing the answers in a notebook, but I really liked it this time that way.
And we were able to fill them out and discuss. And that's the key thing. You want to fill them out individually because we want to know Coda wants to know what is my answer without having any influence of his answer.
Right.
And the opposite is also true. So we want to be able to answer completely authentically to where we are and what we think, and then be able to discuss our answers and kind of come to this place of understanding and mutual agreement on these points.
And also see how close you are in your answers. I mean, there were some answers that we were like, wow, we both had the same, we said it differently, but we both had the same answer for some of those questions. And why is that encouraging? Well, because when you're doing that, you go, wow, we're on the same page. It really gets you excited because you're like, we're on the same page when it comes to these certain things. And that's encouraging for your relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that when she gave an opposite answer of mine in a couple places, we throw up our arms and go, oh no, we're in different spots. No, it's not that at all. It gives an opportunity for her to give kind of an explanation about why her answer was what it was, and mine also. And then you realize, oh, that's why we were thinking about that differently. And that even helps you sometimes get on the same page.
Now, one of the things that ended up happening that was kind of unplanned but completely necessary is we ended up completely overhauling how we approach rules.
Yes.
But
this was good.
And how we organize that system. So before, a week before we went into boot camp, we started talking a lot about expectations around how I approach Coda, how I speak to him, and what he wants more from me as far as how I interact in our relationship. And that was not a focus of boot camp. That was not a goal of boot camp, but it ended up being one that we kind of threw in there because that was the natural progression that our relationship was taking. And so we needed to use boot camp to also solidify what we were trying to build in that area. And
it worked great. I mean, it was one of those things where we realized, hey, we're going to throw a little bit of this out, because this is exactly what we need to do in order to get the result that we wanted to get at the end of boot camp. And so it turned out to be, hey, this is going to be a good detour kind of thing.
And so we really meticulously went through our pillar system and what our focuses were, what he needs from me, what he expects from me, and what my responsibilities are. And we went through everything, and we really solidified what falls into a punishment, what falls into correction, how do we maintain these systems long term. And my list of rules is not small. I mean, it's pretty...
it's very thorough. It's a very thorough list.
I was going to say extensive, but thorough is a better word, because none of my rules are complicated.
Right.
And none of my rules are completely outlandish. They're all very straightforward. They all make so much sense. They're all very simple, but it is thorough, so it is long.
And the reason for that is that one of the things that we wanted to come out of boot camp is we felt like that simplicity was not necessarily our problem. It was the little details that we were missing in all of that. And so we needed to get more detailed. So we took those simple concepts and got more details in it. And what's come out of it has been really, really good, because we're both on the same page in terms of, before, this would kind of be a gray area. I don't think we have any more gray areas. We've kind of fixed that.
Time will tell.
Yes, time will tell.
But I am feeling really good right now that I really do think that we tried to think through everything so thoroughly and so meticulously that I really do think that we've eliminated a lot of the gray area.
A lot of gray area.
Again, time will tell, and we wrote everything down in a notebook, and we structured it in a way that there is room to add things.
Yes.
So as we find gray areas, as we find things that maybe we forgot about, we'll add them in, because we don't want to leave gray area in our relationship.
Yeah. And what's so nice about that is it's like we've got this, for lack of a better term, a domestic discipline manual instruction
for our
book
relationship.
For our relationship. Yeah. And it's great. You can just refer to it now, and that's why we put it together. It's because if there's a point where I'm thinking, something happens, and I'm like, man, I don't remember what we had discussed about this. The book is right there. I can go there and go, oh yeah, we discussed this. This is what I decided it was going to be, either a correction or a punishment. I don't have to wonder about it. I don't have to go through the steps necessarily. It's right there.
Now, you were concerned that having this discussion about what's correction, what's punishment, you were concerned that that was going to box you into a decision.
Yes, and I was also concerned that this process was going to make it more complicated. We had worked so hard to simplify it. I thought, man, we're going to get so many rules in this thing. It's going to wind up looking, like this huge book of laws and different things that we have, and I'm not going to be able to make a decision about anything. But really, two awesome things came out of that as we just trusted the process. Was no, it's still very, very simple, but we have very thorough details about those simple things in our pillars, as she talked about, that we want to see accomplished. But it didn't box me in. It took a lot of pressure off my mind, because what happened is I had to decide, are these things going to be corrections? Are these things going to be punishments? And all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, I've made the decision for myself. And in other words, it was like the future the future coda has been thought of from the present coda. And so when I face something in the future, I'll be able to look at that and go, man, we already got that covered. I know exactly the decision that I need to make, and I don't have to go through this huge hoop and try to figure out if it's a gray area or not.
Because I think that one of the problems that we were facing is that you would get into a decision. Mm-hmm. Where you were having to decide between, is this punishment or is this correction? And because you are a very fair person, because you want to make sure that you are being fair, that you are not making harsh judgments, you were tending to lean towards leniency.
Absolutely.
Which we were finding to be very detrimental.
It was.
And so my encouragement to you when you express, like, hey, I don't want to be boxed in with all of this, we made the determination that you would decide what's a punishment.
Right.
And punishments would never change.
Yes.
Because you were deciding in that moment with rational thought.
With rational thought, exactly. Not any emotions going on.
And so those would never change, but anything that you deemed correction, you could look at the situation and decide if the situation warranted punishment.
If it needed to be bumped up to punishment, or it just could stay a correction mm-hmm. in that moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to lean towards correction anyway. Right. So it was more important that you decided with rationale,
yes,
what needed to be a punishment versus correction.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It was because we weren't actually in the moment with something that had happened. That actually was so helpful. And again, it took this load off my mind, because it's like, if I find myself in one of these situations and I'm not sure what to do, I don't have to go through that process in my head. We have it written down. And I know what I've categorized it as. If I've categorized it as a correction or a punishment, it's right there. So if Aria has something happen and I'm like, man, I'm not sure what this falls under, I just go to the book now. Mm-hmm. And that is so encouraging to me to have that. I hope it is to you, mm-hmm. because it's a load off my mind of having to make a decision in the moment where my emotions maybe are clouding that judgment just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about our bootcamp experience, hearing about how we structured our bootcamp, and how we really use this time to get on the same page and solidify all of our systems.
See you later.
Bye.